Welcome to Strange 13, the place where reality cracks, truth twists, and history reveals its strangest secrets. Today, we're diving into something truly unbelievable. 13 of the greatest hoaxes the entire world blindly believed. Not small lies, not local rumors, but global illusions, crafted so perfectly, millions accepted them as truth. Some of these hoaxes fooled governments, some fooled scientists, some fooled every single person watching TV. And the craziest part? Many of them could happen again today. So buckle in, because once you hear hoax number 1, you'll realize how terrifyingly easy it is to fool the entire world.
In the summer of 1969, over 600 million people watched a grainy broadcast of Neil Armstrong taking his giant leap for mankind. It was one of humanity's proudest moments. But soon after, a massive wave of doubt swept across the world. People began asking a dangerous question. What if the moon landing was faked? And this wasn't a fringe idea. Millions genuinely believed NASA staged the entire mission inside a Hollywood-style film studio. Hoax believers pointed at evidence that seemed convincing. Why does the flag look like it's waving even with no air on the moon? Why are there no stars in the background of the photos? Why do the shadows fall in different directions? Why does the astronaut's visor reflect what looks like studio lighting? Conspiracy theories spread so widely that even decades later, surveys show up to 20% of Americans still question the moon landing. Entire documentaries were made debunking NASA. Some even claimed legendary director Stanley Kubrick helped film it. But here's the truth. The moon landing did happen. Physics explains the flag movement. Camera exposure explains the lack of stars. The shadows match lunar terrain. Still, this hoax became one of the most powerful in modern history. It showed one terrifying thing. Even the greatest achievement of humankind can be turned into a lie, if enough people decide to believe it. On the night of October 30th, 1938, millions of Americans tuned their radios to hear what they thought was just another evening broadcast. Instead, they heard chaos, sirens, military announcements, scientists screaming about explosions on Mars, and then the words that froze the entire country. We are under attack by Martians. This wasn't a prank radio station. It was a live performance of H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds, narrated by a young Orson Welles. But the problem? It sounded too real. The broadcast used fake news bulletins, live reports, panicked actors, and emergency interruptions. People believed actual aliens were landing in New Jersey and destroying everything. And the reaction was instant madness. Families abandoned their homes. Drivers clogged the highways trying to escape the invasion. Churches filled with people preparing for the end of the world. Some even grabbed guns, convinced they needed to fight off alien attackers. What's even crazier is that newspapers exaggerated the panic even more. Why? Because they were terrified radio might replace print news, so they used the chaos to make radio look irresponsible and dangerous. Later studies showed the panic wasn't as massive as newspapers claimed, but it was still powerful enough to become one of the most legendary hoaxes in modern history. The biggest lesson? People can be manipulated not just by what they hear, but how they hear it. A serious tone, a believable voice, a fake breaking news alert. The entire country learned one thing that night. If the delivery is convincing enough, even the most impossible story can feel terrifyingly real. In 1912, The scientific world exploded with excitement. A strange skull was discovered in a gravel pit in Piltdown, England. A skull that looked halfway between an ape and a human. For decades, scientists had searched desperately for the missing link, the fossil that would finally explain human evolution. And now, it seemed they had found it. The newspapers called it the greatest anthropological discovery in history. Museums built entire exhibits around it. Textbooks updated their chapters. The public was convinced this was humanity's ancient ancestor. But there was one massive problem. Piltdown Man wasn't real. Not even close. The skull was a Frankenstein creation, a human cranium combined with the jaw of an orangutan. The teeth had been filed down with sandpaper. Bones were stained with chemicals to appear ancient. Every detail was crafted to fool the scientific community, and it worked. For over 40 years, the world believed this hoax. It slipped through research papers, conferences, and university studies without being questioned. Why? Because people wanted it to be true. It fit the theories scientists hoped for. It confirmed what they wanted to believe. It wasn't until 1953, using more advanced chemical testing, that Piltdown Man was finally exposed as one of the greatest scientific frauds ever committed. The revelation shocked the world. It proved an uncomfortable truth. Even the smartest people, scientists, professors, museum experts, can be deceived when a lie is crafted to fit their expectations. And when the lie is perfect, it can survive for generations.
In 1934, the world was stunned by a single black and white photograph. A long neck, a curved head, rising from the misty waters of a Scottish lake. The photo became known as the surgeon's photograph, and with one click of a camera, the legend of the Loch Ness monster exploded into global fame. Newspapers called it absolute proof that a prehistoric creature still lived in Loch Ness. Millions stared at the image, convinced they were looking at a real living dinosaur. Tourists flooded Scotland. Scientists debated endlessly. Monster hunters arrived with binoculars and boats, swearing they would capture Nessie. But the truth? The photo was a hoax, one of the most brazen ever. It wasn't exposed until 60 years later. The monster wasn't a giant creature at all. It was a tiny toy submarine with a sculpted head attached. The whole thing was staged by a group of men seeking revenge after being mocked by the local newspaper. They wanted to embarrass the journalists and ended up tricking the entire planet. What makes this hoax legendary isn't just how long it survived, but why it worked so well. The human brain loves mysteries. We see a shape in the fog and immediately fill in the rest. We want monsters to be real. We want magic. We want something hiding just below the surface. For decades, the world believed Nessie existed because that hope, that thrill, was more powerful than logic. A tiny toy, placed in a lake, became one of the greatest proofs of a monster in modern history.
In the late 1970s and early 1980s, farmers across England woke up to a terrifying sight. Perfect circles, massive, geometric, mathematically flawless, carved overnight into their wheat fields. The shapes were enormous, symmetrical, impossibly precise. And the strangest part? They appeared in total silence in the middle of the night, without a single witness. Newspapers exploded with the story. Scientists were baffled. UFO investigators declared them direct messages from extraterrestrials.
Even NASA researchers commented on the mysterious patterns. The world was convinced Earth was being contacted. Tourists poured into the countryside. Helicopters hovered over fields. TV stations sent crews to capture the alien signatures. Some circles were so complex that mathematicians called them beyond human ability. But in 1991, two old men stepped forward. Doug Bauer and Dave Chorley, armed with nothing but a plank, a rope, and a sense of humor. They confessed they made the first crop circles themselves, as a prank. Night after night, they stalked through fields, flattening crops with wooden boards, laughing quietly as entire villages panicked at their work. They demonstrated their technique on live television, and the results were identical to the so-called alien circles. The world was stunned. All the fear, all the theories, all the documentaries, brought down by two pranksters with a piece of wood. But here's the most surreal part. Even after the confession, many people refused to believe them. Some insisted real crop circles still had alien origins, because sometimes the mystery is more satisfying than the truth.
In 1869, workers digging a well in the quiet town of Cardiff, New York, struck something solid. At first, they thought it was just a rock. But as they cleared the dirt, a shape appeared. A human shape. A 10-foot-tall, petrified giant lying in the ground as if frozen in time. News spread like wildfire. People traveled for miles just to witness the biblical giant that seemed to prove ancient legends were real. Religious groups claimed it was evidence of the Nephilim, the giant beings mentioned in Scripture. Scientists argued endlessly, some insisting it was a prehistoric human species. Within days, crowds lined up paying admission just to stare at the stone body. The Cardiff Giant became the most famous discovery in America. But the truth behind it? A brilliant lie. The giant wasn't ancient. It wasn't petrified. It wasn't even real stone. It was carved out of gypsum by a cigar maker named George Hall, a man who loved one thing more than money: proving people wrong. After overhearing a preacher claim the Earth was only a few thousand years old, Hall decided to teach the world a lesson. He hired sculptors, had the giant buried on a farm, and waited. Months later, the trap sprung perfectly. People believed every word. Scientists argued over its age. Entrepreneurs fought to buy it. Ho eventually confessed, laughing as he revealed the entire scheme. But the most fascinating part? Even after the confession, thousands still visited the giant, refusing to believe it was fake. Because sometimes people would rather embrace a beautiful lie than accept a disappointing truth.
In 1917, two young cousins from a small English village claimed they had photographed something extraordinary. Not ghosts, not monsters, but real fairies. Delicate, winged creatures dancing beside a stream in the forest. The photographs were astonishing, perfectly framed, clear as daylight. The girls, Frances and Elsie, stood calmly as tiny fairy-like beings fluttered around them. The images spread across Britain like wildfire, and soon the entire world was captivated. What made this hoax legendary wasn't the public reaction, it was who fell for it. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the creator of Sherlock Holmes, declared the photos genuine proof of fairies. Newspapers praised the girls for revealing a hidden magical world. Spiritualists celebrated the images as confirmation of the supernatural. People didn't just believe the pictures, they wanted to believe the pictures. For decades, no one could explain how two ordinary children produced such convincing images. Experts examined the photos and found no signs of tampering because the trick was incredibly simple. The fairies were actually paper cutouts traced from a popular children's book and propped up with hairpins. The girls used their father's camera, took the pictures, and watched in silence as the world lost its mind. They finally confessed in the 1980s, more than 60 years later. But even then, Francis insisted that one of the photos was real. And that's what makes this hoax unforgettable. It wasn't just about fooling people. It was about how desperately humans cling to magic, even when logic tells them to let go.
In 1983, the world of journalism was shaken by what seemed like the discovery of the century: the personal diaries of Adolf Hitler, hidden for decades in secret locations across Germany. Dozens of notebooks appeared, aged, stained, each embossed with Hitler's initials. Inside were intimate entries describing his personal thoughts, political strategies, and even emotional struggles. If genuine, these diaries had the power to rewrite history. Germany's most respected magazine, Stern, proudly announced the discovery. They paid over $3.7 million for exclusive rights. Historians flew in from around the world. Newspapers printed headlines in bold black letters: "Hitler's Lost Diaries Found." The public was stunned. Were these the final secrets of one of the darkest figures in human history? But the truth was far more ridiculous. The diaries were fake, not sophisticated fakes, laughably bad ones. The pages contained grammar mistakes Hitler never made. The paper was too modern. The aging techniques were sloppy, using basic chemicals that experts quickly identified. And the author? A small-time art forger named Konrad Kujau, who created the diaries using cheap notebooks he bought at local stores. But here's the fascinating part. The hoax didn't succeed because the fakes were good. It succeeded because people wanted them to be real. Publishers wanted the scoop of the century. Historians wanted groundbreaking material. The public wanted shocking revelations. The desire for a sensational story blinded everyone. To the obvious, when the truth finally came out, it became one of the most embarrassing scandals in journalism, a reminder that even experts can be fooled when chasing fame, profit, or glory.
On Halloween night 1992, millions of British viewers tuned in to a BBC special called Ghostwatch. It looked like a real, live investigation of a haunted house in suburban London. A family claimed to be tormented by a violent spirit named Pipes. The BBC hosts walked through dark hallways, interviewed terrified witnesses, and broadcast live supernatural activity in real time. It felt authentic, too authentic. Doors slammed on their own, furniture moved, children screamed, shadowy figures appeared for a split second on camera. So fast, viewers had to replay the footage to confirm what they saw. And then the final moment hit. A massive supernatural event ripped through the house and even seemed to affect the BBC studio itself. Panic exploded across Britain. The BBC was flooded with over 30,000 calls from terrified viewers. People genuinely believed a demon had been unleashed through their television. Some families evacuated their homes. Schools reported children too scared to sleep. Psychologists later documented cases of real trauma from the broadcast. But here's the twist. Ghostwatch wasn't live. It wasn't a documentary. It wasn't real at all. It was a pre-recorded horror movie designed to look like a news report. The BBC hid disclaimers, making it nearly impossible to distinguish fiction from reality. The aftermath was so intense that the BBC banned the program for a decade. The lesson was clear. Even in the age of television, a well-constructed illusion delivered by trusted presenters can make an entire nation believe in the impossible.
In 1995, television networks across the globe aired something so shocking, so graphic, that millions of viewers believed they were witnessing classified government footage. The program was called Alien Autopsy, Fact or Fiction. The film claimed to show a top-secret U.S. military operation, the dissection of an extraterrestrial body allegedly recovered from the famous Roswell UFO crash of 1947. The grainy footage looked authentic. Doctors in protective suits worked silently under bright surgical lamps. The alien's body lay on a metal table, pale skin, swollen head, oversized eyes, exactly how people imagined a real alien might look. The camera shook with the imperfections of 1940s technology, making everything feel disturbingly real. UFO believers exploded with excitement. Newspapers called it the most convincing alien evidence ever caught on camera. Debates erupted worldwide. Even some scientists hesitated before calling it fake. But behind the scenes, the truth was already unraveling. The film was created by a British filmmaker named Ray Santilli, who claimed he had restored the original footage. But as investigations continued, it became painfully clear. There was no original footage, no alien body, no secret military autopsy. The alien was a highly detailed rubber model, filled with animal organs purchased from a local butcher. The set was built in a small apartment. The equipment was borrowed. Every detail, including the shaky camera movements, was designed intentionally to mimic an authentic 1940s military film. And the wildest part? Even after Santilli admitted it was staged, many people still believe the footage is real, claiming the confession was just a government cover-up. Because when a lie taps into a global mystery, it becomes almost impossible to kill.
In 1996, a respected academic journal called Social Text proudly published a dense intellectual article titled Transgressing the Boundaries Toward a Transformative Hermeneutics of Quantum Gravity. The paper was filled with complex language, philosophical arguments, and references to quantum physics. It seemed groundbreaking, a bridge between science, culture, and postmodern theory. But there was one enormous problem. The entire paper was fake. The author, physicist Alan Sokal, had written it as a deliberate hoax. He filled the article with nonsense, sentences that sounded smart but meant absolutely nothing. He invented connections between physics and philosophy that had no scientific basis. He used buzzwords and academic jargon to camouflage the fact that the paper was pure gibberish. And the journal accepted it without question. Why? Because it aligned with their ideological preferences. It sounded radical, progressive, sophisticated. The editors were so impressed by the style and tone that they never checked whether the science made any sense. When Sokal publicly revealed the hoax, the academic world erupted. Professors were furious. Journalists mocked the journal. Entire fields of study were forced to confront uncomfortable questions about intellectual standards. Sokal's message was simple but devastating. If experts judge ideas by how they sound instead of what they mean, even the smartest people can be fooled. The hoax became a milestone in discussions about truth, authority, and academic integrity. It proved that even elite institutions, the places we trust most, are vulnerable to manipulation when pride, ideology, or reputation are on the line. And the scariest part? It showed that a lie wrapped in smart words can pass as truth in even the highest levels of society.
In the 1840s, American crowds flocked to museums and carnival shows to witness something unbelievable: a real, preserved mermaid captured near the Fiji Islands. The creature was horrifying: shriveled skin, sharp teeth, long skeletal fingers. The upper body of a small woman fused with the tail of a fish. Unlike the beautiful mermaids in folklore, this one looked like something dragged from the nightmares of the deep ocean. Newspapers called it the greatest zoological discovery of the century. People waited in long lines just to catch a glimpse. Scientists debated what species it could possibly belong to. Children cried, adults whispered in fear. At the center of it all was the legendary showman P.T. Barnum, a master of deception and publicity. And he knew exactly what he was doing. Because the Fiji Mermaid wasn't a mermaid, not even close. It was a grotesque fusion, the torso of a monkey, expertly stitched onto the tail of a large fish. Crafted by Japanese taxidermists, the creature was designed specifically to shock and confuse. Barnum didn't just display the fake mermaid, he created an entire mythology around it. Fake documents, fabricated stories, paid experts who claimed it was genuine. He engineered the illusion so perfectly that by the time people realized it was a hoax, the myth had already become unstoppable. The Fiji Mermaid proved something powerful. Fear plus curiosity equals the perfect formula for belief. People didn't want a beautiful fantasy. They wanted something monstrous, something forbidden, something that looked like it shouldn't exist. And Barnum delivered exactly that. A creature made of two dead animals that fooled an entire nation. On October 15, 2009, news stations across America cut into their regular programming with a breaking alert. A 6-year-old boy was trapped inside a giant helium balloon drifting uncontrollably across the sky. The silver UFO-shaped balloon floated for miles, chased by helicopters, police, and rescue teams. Millions watched live as reporters described the horrifying possibility: the boy could fall at any moment. The country froze, traffic stopped, schools paused classes. People cried watching the balloon drift higher and higher. When the balloon finally landed, rescue teams rushed in, only to discover it was empty. Panic turned to confusion. Where was the boy? Had he fallen? Was he hiding? Hours later, cameras filmed the shocking discovery. The child was safe, hiding in the family's attic. Relief swept the nation. But something felt wrong. And then came the interview. A reporter asked the boy why he hadn't come out. The boy looked at his father, hesitated, and said, "You guys said we did this for the show." That one sentence shattered everything. The entire event, the balloon, the panic, the nationwide coverage, had been a hoax. A stunt orchestrated by the boy's parents, desperate for media fame and a reality TV deal. They built the balloon, staged the accident, and watched as the entire country fell for it. The FBI arrested the parents. News networks were humiliated. Millions realized they had been emotionally manipulated in real time. The Balloon Boy incident became a modern warning. In the age of cameras, viral content, and instant news, the line between truth and spectacle can disappear in seconds. And a single lie, delivered at the right moment, can hijack an entire nation.